The sun had set over the great savanna of the Thaba Wildlife Conservancy, but the usual quiet symphony of the African night was silenced by something far more formidable, a colossal rolling thunderstorm. The air was thick with the scent of dust and ozone, and the massive darkening clouds promised a night of chaos. Our story begins with a small heart beating far too fast. His name was Leo, a lion cub barely 3 months old. He was a creature of immense courage in the making, but tonight he was just a terrified baby. Leo had been separated from his pride during the sudden, violent downpour. His mother, caught off guard while hunting nearby, had hurried the rest of the litter to higher, safer ground. But Leo, always the curious one, had wandered too close to a rocky outcrop just as the sky ripped open. One deafening crack of thunder, a sound that shook the very earth, and the cub bolted, running blind into the thick thorn bush. He was tiny, maybe the size of a domestic cat, with oversized paws and eyes wide with primal fear. Every flash of lightning revealed a fleeting world of tall, swaying grass and dark, menacing shadows. Leo whimpered, his calls lost in the roar of the wind and the deluge. He searched desperately for the familiar scent and sight of his mother, but the rain washed away all guiding signs. Meanwhile, back at the Conservancy headquarters, David, a dedicated wildlife ranger whose life revolved around the rhythms of this wild place, watched the storm intensify. David was a man of 40-something years, weathered by sun and worry, with a deep affection for the animals he protected. He knew that severe storms were the most dangerous time for young cubs. He ran a quick check on his patrol vehicle, knowing he couldn't venture out until the worst had passed. But his mind was already out there, scanning the darkness for any sign of trouble. Leo kept moving, driven by instinct. The fear was a cold, sharp thing in his belly. He needed shelter, a place where the thunder couldn't reach him. He stumbled upon an old, unused termite mound, hollowed out over the years by previous inhabitants. It wasn't much, just a cramped, damp tunnel, but it offered a tiny pocket of dark silence away from the brutal, flashing light. Leo squeezed inside and curled into the smallest ball he could manage, shaking uncontrollably, his small body chilled to the bone. The storm raged on, but just when Leo thought the darkness was absolute, he heard a new, high-pitched sound, closer than the thunder and far more pitiful. It was a yelp, quickly followed by a tiny, panicked whimper. Into the shelter stumbled a creature entirely alien to the savannah. A small domestic puppy, no bigger than Leo, perhaps 5 months old. His coat, a patchy mix of brown and white, was soaked through, plastered to his skinny frame. This puppy, who went by the name Pip, had been accidentally left behind by a group of travelers earlier that day. He had been wandering, lost and confused, his only certainty being the terror of the storm. Pip, blindly seeking any relief from the cold and noise, squeezed into the tight tunnel and bumped right against Leo. The lion cub reacted first. He let out a miniature, ragged growl, a sound that was supposed to be terrifying, but came out sounding like a choked cough. He flattened his ears and tried to make himself seem bigger, ready to defend his tiny patch of safety. But Pip didn't snarl back. He didn't even bark. He was too exhausted, too cold, and too scared to see a predator. All he saw was another small, shivering body in the dark. With a small, desperate sigh that was barely audible over the rain outside, Pip did the only thing he knew to do in times of fear. He pressed himself tightly against the warm mass beside him, burrowing his wet snout into the lion cub's damp fur, seeking shared warmth. For a moment, Leo was rigid. Every predatory instinct told him to push this small, strange creature away. But the simple, non-threatening pressure of the puppy's body, the desperate need for comfort emanating from this small bundle of fluff, short-circuited his fear. He felt the puppy's frantic shivering matching his own. In the midst of the most terrifying night of his young life, the fear in Leo's chest began to subside, replaced by a strange, shared sense of desperation. He shifted slightly, and Pip instantly snuggled closer. The lion cub realized he was no longer alone. He closed his eyes and allowed the unexpected warmth to spread, finding a sliver of peace in the heart of the chaos. The two unlikely companions spent the rest of the night pressed against each other. The wild, raw fear of the storm still clawed at the edges of the shelter, but inside, a fragile, impossible bond was beginning to form. They were two lost babies, hidden from the world, finding solace in their shared vulnerability. If you are loving this incredible emotional story of friendship and survival, please take a second right now to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It helps us find more amazing rescue stories like this to share with you every week. Thank you so much for your support. The first grey light of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky with weak, watery colors. The rain had finally subsided, leaving the savannah glistening and dripping. The silence that replaced the thunder was profound and heavy. Inside the small termite mound, Leo and Pip stirred. The lion cub stretched, letting out a small, satisfied rumble. He was still hungry and confused about his mother's absence, but the fear was gone. He looked at the little brown and white creature huddled against his belly. Pip lifted his head, gave a small, sleepy lick to Leo's chin, and wagged his tiny tail, completely unaware that the creature he had bonded with was a future apex predator. This strange alliance was about to be discovered, and the consequences of their friendship would change the lives of everyone involved. Outside, David was preparing to finally begin his search. He pulled on his rain-soaked boots and grabbed his binoculars, heading straight for the territory where he suspected the pride had been last seen, completely unaware that the animal he was looking for was less than a mile away, in the company of a completely lost and very friendly puppy. The morning mist hung low over the savannah, muffling the sounds and softening the sharp edges of the landscape. Ranger David drove slowly, his eyes scanning the dew-laden grass for any sign of Leo's pride. He was experienced enough to know that finding a tiny cub in this vastness would be like finding a needle in a haystack, but he had to try. His heart held a quiet dread, the fear that he would only find tracks leading to a sad end. He followed the general path the pride had taken the previous evening, eventually spotting the large paw prints of the adult lions heading up toward a ridge. David knew they would be safe up there. But what about the little one? He parked the vehicle and continued on foot, using his binoculars to sweep the area near the rocky outcrop where the storm had hit hardest. The air smelled fresh, clean, and earthy. It was the smell that led him, a very faint, musky scent of a lion cub, mixed with something sweet and strangely domestic, like damp dog fur. He moved cautiously toward a cluster of thick bushes and saw, nestled at the base of a large, weathered termite mound, a small, dark opening. David approached slowly, his rifle held loosely, prepared for anything, a stray jackal, maybe a scared porcupine, but certainly not what he saw next. Two small forms emerged, stretching stiffly into the cool morning air. First came the cub. It was Leo, smaller and more disheveled than David remembered from the last time he saw the pride. The cub blinked against the light, then stumbled out into the open. David felt a wave of relief, followed instantly by a tidal wave of shock that froze him mid-stride. Cuddled right at Leo's side, walking step for step with the lion cub, was a puppy. A tiny, floppy-eared domestic puppy, patchy brown and white, looking up at the lion cub with absolute trusting devotion. The two creatures were touching, the puppy, Pip, nudging his nose affectionately into the cub's shoulder as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They were not fighting, not stalking, not even wary of each other. They were simply companions emerging from a night of shared terror. David lowered his binoculars, rubbing his eyes. Sure, the lack of sleep and the morning mist had finally made him hallucinate. He raised them again. No mistake. A future king and a lost mutt, a predator and prey, united in friendship. He slowly moved closer, making soft, reassuring noises. Leo heard him first. The cub looked up, his ears flattening, and he instinctively stepped slightly in front of Pip. The small, ragged growl from the previous night returned, now aimed at the tall, strange human. Pip, sensing Leo's distress, began to bark. A high-pitched, brave, utterly useless little bark directed at David. It was a perfect, tiny demonstration of loyalty, a puppy defending his best friend, the lion cub. David stopped. He understood the situation instantly. The storm had broken the rules of the wild. These two were bonded, not by choice or instinct, but by cold and fear. If he tried to grab the cub, the puppy would interfere. If he left them, the pride would never accept Pip, and Leo was still too young to survive alone. The dilemma was immense. The laws of the Conservancy were clear. Wild animals stay wild, and domestic animals must be removed. But how could he separate them now? He saw the genuine, uncalculated love in Pip's eyes and the fierce, protective instinct in Leo's stance. David made a decision that went against every manual, every protocol, and every bit of common sense he had accumulated over 20 years. He would bring them both in. He moved slowly, speaking in a low, gentle voice. He focused his attention on Pip, knowing that the puppy was the key. He offered Pip a piece of dried meat from his pocket. Pip hesitated, looking at Leo for permission. Leo nudged him gently, seemingly indicating it was safe. Pip accepted the treat, his tail wagging furiously now. Once Pip was calmer, David gently scooped up the puppy. As he expected, Leo panicked. The cub let out a distressed cry, attempting to follow Pip. David placed Pip in a large, soft carrier box in the back of the Jeep, making sure Leo could still see him. The cub immediately tried to jump into the box with his friend. David seized the opportunity, quickly and gently lifting Leo and placing him beside Pip. The moment the two were reunited, the noise stopped. Leo curled up instantly against the small, warm body of the puppy, tucking his head under Pip's chin. The ride back to the headquarters was quiet, save for the engine's rumble. David drove, occasionally glancing back at the impossible pair, feeling a strange mix of astonishment and responsibility. Back at the veterinary enclosure, David set up a comfortable, secure area. They were given warm water and a small meal, milk formula for Leo and soft food for Pip. The first thing they did after eating was press back together. David was meticulous. He documented everything, but he knew he couldn't share the full truth yet. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a phenomenon, and it needed careful handling. If the world heard about a lion cub and a puppy being best friends, it would bring immediate attention, which could be dangerous for the animals and for the Conservancy's rules. For now, this strange friendship was his secret. He sat on a low stool watching them. Leo, who should be playful and aggressive, was calm and content only when Pip was near. Pip, who should be terrified of a predator, slept with his tongue hanging out, using Leo's furry leg as a pillow. Their need for each other was absolute. This powerful connection, born from the terror of the storm, was now the biggest challenge David faced. He knew he was living on borrowed time. The puppy belonged with people, and the lion cub belonged in the wild. But how could he break a bond this deep? The emotional clock was ticking. We are so grateful you're following this incredible and dramatic story of survival and friendship. If you haven't already, please show your support for these kinds of amazing animal stories by smashing that like button right now. Your likes tell YouTube that this content is important and helps us reach more compassionate people around the world. Days turned into a week. Leo and Pip grew slightly, their movements becoming more confident, but their bond remained the same, solid and unquestioning. Leo, the cub, was beginning to show the unmistakable musculature of a future predator, his tiny claws sharper, his bites in play harder. Pip, the puppy, was learning to interpret every rumble, every flick of the tail, instinctively understanding Leo's mood. The situation was becoming untenable. David knew he had to act soon. The lion cub's instincts were beginning to awaken, and what was once a sweet cuddle could soon become a dangerous mistake. He spent hours on the phone, quietly contacting specialized animal behaviorists, desperate to find a solution that wouldn't shatter the impossible friendship they had witnessed. He knew that the dramatic choice he had to make next would shock everyone, but the safety of both animals depended on it. David stood by the secure fence of the enclosure, his heart heavy. It'd been nearly 2 weeks since the storm brought Leo and Pip into his life. The cub was growing at a startling rate, his playfulness edged with true predatory strength. Just yesterday, a simple game of tug-of-war over a piece of cloth ended with Leo's razor-sharp baby teeth accidentally drawing blood from David's hand. He knew the incident was harmless, but it was a clear warning. Nature was asserting itself. He had finally consulted the head behaviorist, Dr. Alistair Finch, who specialized in integrating orphan predators. Dr. Finch's advice was direct and heartbreaking. The bond with Pip had to be broken, and quickly. "Leo is forming his identity now, David," Dr. Finch had explained over a grainy satellite phone line. "If Pip remains his companion, the cub will lose his natural fear of small, vulnerable prey. He will think dogs, and by extension smaller animals, are family. That is a death sentence, either for Pip later on or for Leo when he's released and hunts without caution." The safety of the future king demanded the separation. David's shocking choice was not just to separate them, but to do it drastically, to ensure the bond would weaken enough for Leo's wild instincts to take over. Pip, the tiny, devoted puppy, would be the key. That morning, David loaded Pip into his vehicle. The puppy was distressed, whining and looking back toward the enclosure. Leo watched from the fence, his ears pinned back, letting out a mournful low moan that tore at David's soul. David drove Pip a great distance away to a neighboring farm run by his old friend Sarah. Sarah, a kind woman who ran a small, reputable shelter for domestic animals, promised to take Pip in, love him, and find him a secure home. Pip was a domestic dog. He deserved a life with humans, not one constantly flirting with a lion's awakening instincts. The immediate effect on Leo was dramatic. The cub refused to eat. He paced the enclosure, letting out loud, pathetic calls. He searched for Pip's scent, confused and betrayed by the sudden loss of his constant companion. David watched, suffering through the heartbreak, knowing this pain was necessary for the cub's survival in the wild. For 3 days, Leo mourned. His aggressive play vanished. He was withdrawn, sad, and unresponsive to David's efforts to comfort him. David knew the cub was learning the painful first lesson of the wild. Companions often disappear. But then, slowly, Leo began to change. With Pip's soothing presence gone, David was able to introduce enrichment activities that stimulated Leo's true nature. He started giving Leo whole, raw pieces of meat, encouraging him to use his claws and teeth as a predator should. Leo began to stalk the toys David placed in the enclosure. He started to practice the lion's roar, a tiny, raspy cough that promised future power. After a month, Leo was strong, independent, and developing the necessary wildness he needed for eventual reintroduction to his pride. He still accepted David's presence as a caregiver, but the desperate need for cuddling was gone, replaced by a fierce, self-reliant nature. It was time to find Leo's family. David worked for weeks, tracking the pride, observing their movements until he found the perfect moment, a gentle, quiet evening when the pride had made a large kill and were relaxed, less likely to be aggressive toward a returning scent. The reintroduction was tense. David drove Leo close, letting the cub smell the familiar scent of his mother and siblings. When David opened the carrier, Leo hesitated for just a moment, looking back at the human who saved him. Then, instinct took over. With a burst of speed, Leo ran into the tall grass, a small shadow swallowed by the gathering dusk. David waited for hours, listening. Finally, he heard it, a mixture of low growls and the gentle, reassuring chuffing sounds of a mother lion recognizing her lost son. Leo was home. But what about Pip? A few months passed. Leo was successfully integrated into the pride, growing into a confident, thriving young lion. David, however, often thought of the little puppy, Pip. One afternoon, David drove to Sarah's farm. He found Pip playing in the yard. Pip wasn't a baby anymore. He was a sturdy, happy young dog with a shiny coat and a loving family. Sarah had adopted him herself. As David approached, Pip barked happily and bounded over, tail wagging. David knelt down and stroked the dog's head. Pip was safe, loved, and exactly where he belonged. The final, shocking part of the story came a year later. David was driving near the boundary fence, observing Leo's pride, which was now magnificent. Leo, a nearly grown male, was strong and powerful. Suddenly, David saw something move on the other side of the fence. It was Sarah, walking Pip on a leash. She lived nearby now, and sometimes walked him along the remote perimeter. The moment Leo saw the familiar patchy brown and white figure, he stopped, dropping the piece of carcass he was guarding. He didn't growl. He didn't stalk. Instead, he approached the fence slowly, his massive lion body moving with a strange, hesitant grace. Pip saw Leo. The young dog immediately began to strain against his leash, whining softly, pulling Sarah toward the fence. The two friends, now separated by steel wire and the insurmountable law of nature, stood nose to nose. The lion, a king of the wild, and the dog, a beloved pet. There was no aggression, only a deep, profound recognition. Leo let out a soft, familiar chuff, the sound lions make to greet their family. Pip licked the lion's massive muzzle through the fence, his tail wagging with the ecstatic, unquestioning love that had saved Leo's life during that terrible storm. They stayed like that for a full minute, an impossible meeting, a silent testament to a bond that transcended instinct, species, and the rules of the wild. David watched from a distance, tears stinging his eyes. The separation had been necessary to save Leo's life, but it had never erased the love they shared. He realized then what the true miracle was, that a lost puppy found a scared lion cub, and in doing so, taught everyone about the shocking, simple power of unconditional friendship.